Is that black woman going to clean or serve? The question, whispered with casual dismissiveness by the event coordinator to her assistant, cut through the elegant ballroom's ambient chatter like a blade through silk. The woman they were discussing, Dr. Evelyn Carter, 72 years old, wearing her grandmother's carefully preserved navy blue dress and carrying a worn leather handbag, had just stepped through the ornate entrance of the Metropolitan Cultural Center, completely unaware that her presence had already been reduced to assumptions about manual labor. The coordinator, a sharp-featured woman named Jessica Mitchell in her early 30s, adjusted her wireless headset and surveyed the distinguished gathering with the practiced eye of someone who had orchestrated dozens of high-profile events. Tonight's annual Heritage Foundation Gala was particularly important, a celebration of community leaders who had transformed lives through education and mentorship. The ballroom, draped in golden fabric and illuminated by crystal chandeliers, buzzed with the conversation of mayors, university presidents, and philanthropists. Yet Jessica's attention had fixated on the elderly black woman who had entered alone, her modest appearance standing in stark contrast to the evening's formal elegance. "Should I direct her to the service entrance?" the assistant asked, her voice carrying the same thoughtless assumption that had prompted the initial question. They watched as Dr. Carter paused near the registration table, her weathered hands smoothing the fabric of her dress, a gesture that spoke of someone ensuring her appearance met the evening's standards despite limited resources. What neither Jessica nor her assistant could have known was that Dr. Carter had spent the previous evening carefully pressing that navy dress, the same one she had worn to her daughter's college graduation 30 years earlier, and to her son's medical school ceremony 5 years after that. The dress represented more than clothing. It embodied every sacrifice she had made, every extra hour she had worked as a night shift custodian while earning her own doctoral degree, every penny she had saved to ensure her children could pursue educations that would open doors she had been forced to approach through service entrances. The registration volunteers, two well-meaning society ladies in their 60s, exchanged uncertain glances as Dr. Carter approached their table. Their hesitation was palpable. This woman didn't match their mental image of the evening's typical attendee. One of them, Mrs. Helen Whitfield, a retired bank executive with perfectly coiffed silver hair, leaned forward with a patronizing smile that she believed conveyed kindness. "Excuse me, dear," Mrs. Whitfield said, her voice carrying the particular tone reserved for addressing service staff. "Are you here for the catering setup? The kitchen entrance is around the back of the building. I can have someone show you the way, Dr. Carter's expression remained composed, though a familiar weight settled in her chest, the same weight she had carried through decades of similar moments. She had experienced this assumption countless times, at academic conferences where colleagues mistook her for administrative support, at her own children's school events where other parents directed her toward the volunteer cleanup crew, at community meetings where her expertise was overlooked until someone needed assistance with practical arrangements. "I'm here for the gala," Dr. Carter replied quietly, her voice carrying the measured dignity that came from years of navigating such interactions. "I believe I should be on your guest list." Mrs. Whitfield's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her helpful demeanor as she began scanning the alphabetized list with obvious skepticism. "Of course, dear. What name should I look for? Are you perhaps someone's guest?" The assumption that she couldn't possibly be an invited attendee hung in the air like expensive perfume, present, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Dr. Carter watched as Mrs. Whitfield's manicured finger traced down the list of names, clearly expecting to find nothing. Around them, the ballroom continued to fill with guests who moved through the space with the confidence of belonging, their presence never questioned, their purpose never assumed to involve cleaning or serving. Jessica Mitchell approached the registration table, her coordinator's badge gleaming under the chandelier light. "Is there some kind of problem here?" she asked, her tone suggesting that problems at her events were simply not acceptable. "This woman says she's on the guest list," Mrs. Whitfield explained, her voice carrying just enough emphasis on says to convey her doubt without being explicitly rude. Dr. Carter remained silent, having learned long ago that defending her right to occupy spaces often created more controversy than simply allowing the truth to reveal itself. She watched Jessica's eyes take inventory of her appearance. The careful but inexpensive dress, the practical shoes chosen for comfort rather than fashion, the absence of jewelry beyond her late husband's simple wedding ring. Everything about Dr. Carter's presentation suggested someone who worked for others rather than someone others worked to honor. "Let me see that list," Jessica said, her fingers already reaching for the clipboard with the efficiency of someone accustomed to solving problems quickly. She scanned the names with professional speed, her expression growing increasingly confused as she failed to find what she expected, or rather, failed to find what she didn't expect. The ballroom around them continued its elegant dance of arrival and greeting. Distinguished guests embraced old friends, exchanged business cards, and moved through conversations about university boards and charitable foundations. A string quartet played softly from a corner stage, their music providing a sophisticated backdrop to the evening's celebration. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, their professional movement a choreographed complement to the gathering's refined atmosphere. Yet at the registration table, time seemed suspended in a moment of institutional assumptions colliding with individual dignity. Dr. Carter stood patiently, her hands folded in front of her, while three women struggled to reconcile their expectations with the reality before them. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible. How could someone who looked like she should be working the event actually be important enough to attend it? If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Mrs. Whitfield continued her search through the guest list, her finger now moving more slowly as the names became increasingly familiar. Community leaders, business executives, political figures she recognized from newspaper photographs. Each name she encountered made Dr. Carter's presence seem more unlikely, more out of place in this carefully curated gathering of the city's most influential citizens. "Perhaps there's been some mistake," Jessica suggested gently, her coordinator's instincts seeking to resolve the situation without creating a scene. "Are you sure you have the right event? There's a community appreciation dinner next week that might be more—" She stopped herself before completing the sentence, but the implication hung in the air nonetheless. The suggestion that Dr. Carter belonged at a different, presumably less prestigious gathering reflected assumptions about who deserved recognition and who deserved to serve. Dr. Carter's eyes moved slowly across the ballroom, taking in the faces of people she had spent decades serving in ways they would never know. She recognized the university president, whose institution had benefited from her research on adult literacy programs. She saw the mayor whose education initiatives had been built upon foundations she had helped establish through years of quiet advocacy. Near the bar, she spotted three former students who had gone on to become doctors, lawyers, and teachers. Success stories that carried traces of her influence, though few would remember the night shift custodian who had encouraged them to pursue their dreams. The irony was as bitter as it was familiar. In a room celebrating educational achievement and community transformation, she was assumed to be present only in a service capacity. The very hands that had written grant proposals for literacy programs, that had guided struggling students through academic challenges, that had built bridges between communities and institutions, were hands others expected to see holding cleaning supplies or serving trays. "Found it, Mrs. Whitfield announced suddenly, her voice carrying surprise tinged with confusion. "Dr. Evelyn Carter, you're actually on the list." The surprise in her voice suggested that being on the list was not merely unexpected. It was somehow miraculous, as if the universe had shifted to accommodate an impossibility. Jessica leaned over to confirm the finding, her eyes widening as she read not just the name, but the designation beside it. The ballroom continued its elegant evening around them, unaware that at its entrance, assumptions were being challenged one line of text at a time. As Mrs. Whitfield's finger traced the designation beside Dr. Carter's name, her expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm. The words printed clearly on the guest list seemed to defy everything she had assumed about the woman standing before her. Guest of honor, lifetime achievement in education. Dr. Carter watched the recognition dawn on their faces with the same quiet dignity she had maintained for 47 years of similar moments. She remembered the first time someone had made assumptions about her purpose in an academic space, 1976, during her first semester pursuing her doctoral degree at the State University. She had been 31 years old then, working the night shift cleaning the very buildings where she attended classes during the day, her children asleep at home with her mother while she pursued a dream that seemed impossible to everyone except herself. The memory was as vivid as yesterday, arriving at the education building at 6 a.m. after a full night of emptying trash cans and mopping floors, only to have a professor ask if she was there to clean his office before his 8 o'clock class. She had been wearing her university ID badge, carrying textbooks, and heading toward the same classroom where she would defend her dissertation proposal 3 years later. Yet all he saw was a black woman with tired eyes and work clothes, and he made the assumption that would echo through decades of her professional life. Dr. Carter, Jessica repeated slowly, as if testing the title on her tongue. I apologize for the confusion. You're tonight's honoree. The apology carried the hollow ring of social obligation rather than genuine understanding. Dr. Carter had heard similar apologies countless times, from department heads who had overlooked her research contributions, from conference organizers who had seated her at tables with administrative staff rather than fellow academics, from colleagues who had praised her work while simultaneously expressing surprise that she was capable of producing it. What they couldn't understand, what the registration volunteers and event coordinators of the world never seemed to grasp, was that each assumption was a small theft. Every time someone looked at her and saw a service worker rather than a scholar, they stole a piece of the recognition she had earned through decades of sacrifice and achievement. They reduced 47 years of academic excellence to the color of her skin and the modest circumstances that had shaped her journey. Mrs. Whitfield fumbled with the registration materials, her earlier confidence replaced by flustered embarrassment. Dr. Carter, please accept our apologies. Here's your event program and your table assignment. You're seated at the head table, of course. The "of course" carried its own irony. There had been nothing obvious or inevitable about Dr. Carter's path to this moment. Every step had been earned through persistence that others couldn't imagine, through nights when she had fallen asleep over textbooks after working 10-hour shifts, through years when she had chosen between buying her children new clothes and purchasing required academic texts, through decades when she had smiled politely at assumptions about her intelligence and capability while privately documenting every slight for future reference. As Dr. Carter accepted the program, she caught sight of her own photograph on the cover, a professional headshot taken specifically for tonight's recognition. The image showed her as she truly was, Dr. Evelyn Carter, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Adult Education, founder of 3 literacy programs that had served over 15,000 students, author of 12 research papers that had influenced national education policy, and recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Community Education. The photograph had been taken in her office at the university, surrounded by the diplomas and certificates that told the story of her academic journey. Behind her desk, bookshelves held not just the scholarly texts she had authored, but also handwritten thank you notes from students whose lives had been transformed by her programs. Those letters, more than any formal recognition, represented the true measure of her life's work. Jessica cleared her throat nervously. Dr. Carter, the evening's program includes a presentation about your contributions to adult education. The mayor will be introducing you, and there's a video tribute from some of your former students. Dr. Carter nodded graciously, though the mention of former students brought a bittersweet smile to her face. She thought of Marcus, who had come to her literacy program at age 45, unable to read well enough to help his own children with homework. Now he was a successful small business owner who employed 12 people and had sent all 3 of his children to college. There was Maria, who had learned English in Dr. Carter's ESL classes and had gone on to become a nurse, serving the same community where she had once struggled to communicate with doctors about her own family's health needs. The video tribute would likely feature success stories like these, but Dr. Carter knew it couldn't capture the full scope of what those programs had meant. It couldn't show the nights she had stayed late to help students who worked multiple jobs, or the Saturdays she had spent tutoring children whose parents were attending her adult education classes. It couldn't convey the years she had spent advocating for funding when policymakers questioned whether adult literacy programs were worth the investment. "There's also a scholarship being established in your name," Mrs. Whitfield added, her voice now carrying genuine respect rather than the patronizing tone she had used earlier. "The Evelyn Carter Educational Opportunity Fund will provide financial assistance to adult learners pursuing their degrees." The scholarship represented more than financial aid. It embodied Dr. Carter's belief that education was a human right rather than a privilege, that learning could transform lives regardless of when the journey began, and that every person deserved the chance to reach their full potential. The fund would ensure that other students facing the same challenges she had once navigated would have support and encouragement rather than assumptions and obstacles. As they spoke, the ballroom continued to fill with distinguished guests. But Dr. Carter noticed something different now. Word of her identity had begun to spread through the registration volunteers and event staff, and she could see recognition dawning in faces throughout the room. The mayor's chief of staff approached with a warm smile, extending her hand in greeting. A university vice president who had known Dr. A. Carter for 20 years waved from across the room, his expression showing embarrassment that she had been questioned at registration. Dr. Carter understood that the evening would unfold with the kind of recognition she had rarely experienced during her working years. There would be speeches about her groundbreaking research, testimonials about her impact on thousands of students, and presentations of awards that acknowledged her lifetime of service. The same community that had often overlooked her contributions while she was actively making them would spend the evening celebrating achievements they had failed to recognize in real time. The irony was not lost on her that tonight's honor came now, in retirement, when her work was safely in the past, rather than challenging present assumptions about who could be an academic leader. During her active career, recognition had come slowly and quietly, often long after her male and white colleagues had received similar acknowledgement for comparable work. Publications that had taken her years to research and write had been praised as surprisingly sophisticated or remarkably thorough, language that revealed the low expectations others had held for her scholarship. As Jessica escorted her toward the head table, Dr. Carter reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path from night shift custodian to honored professor had been neither straight nor simple, but it had been hers to walk, and she had walked it with determination that others had consistently underestimated. The transformation in the ballroom's atmosphere was palpable as word of Dr. Carter's true identity rippled through the gathered crowd. Conversations that had been flowing smoothly moments before now carried undertones of embarrassment and hurried corrections. Jessica Mitchell found herself fielding whispered questions from staff members who had made similar assumptions, their faces showing the uncomfortable realization that they had nearly directed the evening's guest of honor to the service entrance. Mayor Patricia Williams approached the registration table with purposeful strides, her expression showing both warmth toward Dr. I. Carter and barely concealed frustration with her event staff. As the city's first Black female mayor, Patricia understood the weight of assumptions and the exhaustion that came from constantly proving one's right to occupy prestigious spaces. "Dr. Carter," Mayor Williams said, extending both hands in greeting, "I am so honored you're here tonight. Your work has been the foundation for so many of our city's educational initiatives. I can't wait to share some of the impact statistics in my introduction." Dr. Carter accepted the mayor's greeting with genuine warmth, though she noticed how different this interaction felt from the registration table encounter just minutes earlier. The mayor's respect was authentic, built on years of collaboration and mutual admiration, but it also highlighted the stark contrast in how she was treated once her credentials became known. As they spoke, Dr. Carter became aware of a growing buzz throughout the ballroom. Event staff were quietly correcting earlier assumptions, guests were being informed of her identity, and she could see recognition dawning on faces throughout the crowd. Some expressions showed genuine surprise, others carried embarrassment, and a few revealed the uncomfortable self-reflection that came with realizing their own unconscious biases. Mrs. Helen Whitfield approached with obvious discomfort, her earlier confidence replaced by nervous energy. Dr. Carter, I want to personally apologize for the confusion at registration. I should have been more professional in my approach. The apology was sincere, but Dr. Carter recognized the familiar pattern. Throughout her career, she had received countless such apologies, after being overlooked for speaking opportunities, after having her expertise questioned in meetings, after watching colleagues receive credit for ideas she had originated. The apologies always came after the damage was done, after her qualifications became impossible to ignore, after the cost of assumptions had already been paid. Mrs. Whitfield, Dr. Carter replied gently, I appreciate your apology. Perhaps tonight can serve as a reminder that we shouldn't make assumptions about people based on their appearance. Her response carried the wisdom of someone who had spent decades educating not just students, but colleagues and community members about the danger of limiting expectations. She had learned that anger, while justified, was less transformative than grace, combined with clear truth-telling. As the dinner portion of the evening concluded, Mayor Williams took the stage to begin the recognition ceremony. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly, focusing attention on the podium where a large screen displayed the Heritage Foundation logo. Tonight, Mayor Williams began, we honor someone whose impact on our community extends far beyond what most of us ever knew. Dr. Evelyn Carter has spent nearly 5 decades transforming lives through education, often working behind the scenes, always putting students first, never seeking recognition for herself. The mayor's words carried special weight because she had been one of those students. 30 years earlier, as a young single mother struggling to complete her college degree while working full-time, Patricia Williams had attended Dr. Carter's evening study sessions. Those sessions, held in the basement of the community center, had provided not just academic support, but also childcare, dinner, and the kind of encouragement that made the difference between dropping out and graduating. Dr. Carter didn't just teach adult education, the mayor continued. She revolutionized it. Her research on culturally responsive adult learning methods has been implemented in programs across the country. Her advocacy for flexible scheduling and comprehensive support services changed how institutions serve working adult students. As the mayor spoke, the large screen began displaying photographs from Dr. Carter's career. Images showed her in various settings, leading classes in community centers, accepting research awards, speaking at conferences, and always consistently working directly with students. The photographs told a story of dedication that had often been invisible to the broader community. The video tribute began with Marcus, the former student who had learned to read in his 40s. Now, a successful business owner, he spoke directly into the camera with emotion thick in his voice. Dr. Carter didn't just teach me to read, Marcus said. She taught me that it was never too late to change my life. When I came to her program, I was ashamed, embarrassed that a grown man couldn't help his kids with homework. She made me feel like my goals mattered, like I mattered. The video continued with Maria, the nurse whose English language skills had been developed in Dr. Carter's ESL classes. She stayed after every class to help me with pronunciation, Maria shared. When I was ready to give up, she reminded me that my children were watching, that I was showing them what persistence looked like. One by one, the testimonials painted a picture of someone whose influence extended far beyond traditional measures of academic success. These weren't just former students. They were lives transformed, families lifted, communities strengthened through the ripple effects of education provided with dignity and respect. Dr. Carter watched the video with quiet emotion, seeing faces she remembered clearly despite the passage of years. Each story represented not just individual success, but validation of her belief that education could break cycles of limitation and create opportunities for future generations. As the video concluded, the ballroom erupted in sustained applause. Dr. Carter could see tears in many eyes, recognition dawning that they had been in the presence of someone extraordinary without realizing it. The same woman they had assumed was there to clean or serve had actually been responsible for transforming thousands of lives and influencing national education policy. Mayor Williams returned to the podium with obvious emotion in her voice. Dr. Carter's work reminds us that true leadership often happens quietly, without fanfare, in ways that may not be immediately visible to those of us in positions of public recognition. Tonight, we correct that oversight. The mayor's words carried particular resonance because they acknowledged a broader truth about recognition and value. Dr. Carter's story wasn't unique in its details, but it was representative of countless individuals whose contributions had been overlooked because they didn't fit conventional images of expertise and leadership. As Dr. Carter rose to accept her recognition, the standing ovation seemed to last forever. In that moment, she represented not just her own achievements, but also every person who had been underestimated, every individual whose worth had been determined by appearances rather than actions, every voice that had been marginalized despite having valuable contributions to make. The woman who had been questioned about her right to enter the building was now being celebrated as one of the community's most influential educators, and the irony was not lost on anyone in the room. 6 months after the Heritage Foundation Gala, Dr. Evelyn Carter sat in her modest living room, wearing the same navy blue dress that had caused such confusion that transformative evening. She was reviewing applications for the first recipients of the Evelyn Carter Educational Opportunity Fund, each folder representing someone whose potential might otherwise go unrecognized due to circumstances beyond their control. The scholarship fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations, fueled not just by the foundation's initial commitment, but by donations from community members who had been moved by her story. Mrs. Helen Whitfield had become one of the fund's most dedicated volunteers, channeling her embarrassment from registration night into meaningful action, supporting adult learners. Jessica Mitchell had left event planning to pursue a degree in social work, inspired by Dr. Carter's example of how education could serve as a bridge between communities. Mayor Patricia Williams had implemented new training protocols for all city employees, focusing on unconscious bias and the importance of treating every citizen with dignity, regardless of appearance or perceived status. The training sessions, developed in consultation with Dr. Carter, had become a model for other municipalities struggling with similar challenges in public service delivery. The applications spread across Dr. Carter's coffee table told stories that echoed her own journey decades earlier. There was Janet, a 58-year-old hotel housekeeper seeking to complete her nursing degree. Her application photo showed a tired but determined face, and her essay spoke of dreams deferred but not abandoned. Dr. Carter recognized the combination of exhaustion and hope that had once defined her own academic pursuit. Another application came from Robert, a 43-year-old factory worker whose plant closure had forced him to reconsider his career path. His handwritten personal statement, carefully composed despite obvious struggles with formal writing, expressed his desire to become a teacher so he could help other adults navigate educational opportunities. Dr. Carter smiled at his honesty about feeling intimidated by college campuses, where he feared he wouldn't belong. These stories reminded Dr. Carter why the evening at the Heritage Foundation had been about more than personal recognition. The assumptions made about her that night reflected broader patterns of how society valued different types of work and different types of people. The same hands that had been expected to hold cleaning supplies or serving trays had authored research that influenced national education policy, but it had taken decades for that contribution to be publicly acknowledged. The doorbell interrupted her review of the applications. Through the window, she could see a familiar figure, Marcus, her former student who had learned to read in his 40s and now owned a successful contracting business. He visited monthly, bringing updates about his children's academic progress and seeking advice about business decisions. Their relationship had evolved from teacher-student to something resembling family, bound by shared understanding of how education could transform not just individuals, but entire family trajectories. "Dr. Carter," Marcus said as she opened the door, "I brought the photos from Sarah's graduation." His daughter had just completed her master's degree in social work, the first person in their family to pursue graduate education. "She keeps saying she wants to work with adult learners, just like you did. Says she wants to help people who've been counted out find their way back in." The photographs showed a young woman in cap and gown, surrounded by family members whose pride was evident in every image. But Dr. Carter's attention was drawn to one particular photo, Sarah standing with her grandfather Marcus, both of them holding diplomas. Marcus had completed his GED the same week Sarah finished her master's degree, proving that learning truly had no expiration date. "She asked me to give you this," Marcus continued, handing Dr. Carter a handwritten letter. Sarah's careful script expressed gratitude not just for inspiring her career choice, but for showing her family that education was a lifelong possibility rather than a one-time opportunity limited to traditional students. As Dr. Carter read the letter, she thought about the ripple effects of that night at the Heritage Foundation. The recognition had been meaningful, but the conversations it had sparked about assumptions and value had proven more transformative than any award. Jessica Mitchell's career change, Mrs. Whitfield's volunteer commitment, the mayor's policy initiatives, all represented shifts in perspective that extended far beyond one evening's program. The scholarship recipients would carry these lessons forward as well. Janet, the hotel housekeeper pursuing nursing, would likely face similar assumptions about her capabilities based on her current employment. Robert, the factory worker hoping to teach, would encounter people who questioned whether someone with his background could effectively educate others. But they would also have the support system and recognition that Dr. Carter had often lacked during her own academic journey. Dr. Carter returned to her application reviews with renewed purpose. Each scholarship represented not just financial assistance, but a statement that potential should not be judged by appearances, that wisdom could emerge from unexpected sources, and that everyone deserved the chance to surprise themselves and others with their capabilities. The navy blue dress hanging in her closet would be worn again, to graduation ceremonies for scholarship recipients, to speaking engagements where she shared her story, to community events where her presence served as a reminder that expertise and leadership came in many forms. The dress that had once marked her as someone who didn't belong in prestigious spaces had become a symbol of perseverance and quiet dignity. As evening settled over her neighborhood, Dr. Carter reflected on the question that had started it all. Is that black woman going to clean or serve? The question had revealed more about the questioner's limitations than about her own purpose, but it had also created an opportunity for education and growth. Sometimes the most profound teaching moments came not from planned curricula, but from unexpected encounters that challenged assumptions and opened minds. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. The truth was that Dr. Carter had been serving all along, serving students, serving communities, serving ideals of education and equality that extended far beyond any single evening's recognition. The only difference was that now, finally, that service was being seen and valued for what it truly was, the work of building bridges between what people assumed was possible and what actually could be achieved through persistence, dignity, and the quiet revolutionary act of refusing to be limited by others' expectations. In her modest living room, surrounded by scholarship applications and photographs of transformed lives, Dr. Evelyn Carter embodied a simple but powerful truth, that true honor comes not from being recognized by others, but from recognizing the potential in ourselves and in every person we encounter, regardless of how they appear or where they seem to belong.